Maybe you've already woken up in the middle of the night with that strange feeling that something is missing. It's not hunger. It's not thirst. It's something deeper, more subtle. Like there's a hole in your chest, a silent emptiness that we can never completely fill. A restlessness that insists on remaining, even in moments when everything should be fine. Even when, in the eyes of others, your life seems normal. If you recognize yourself in these words, know that you're not alone. Millions of people walk every day with this same feeling deep in their souls. It's a silent question, but present. What's the point of all this? A pain that doesn't show up on medical exams, but pulses alive inside your chest. Today, we're going to talk about this human experience, as common as it is silent. The moment when we realize that life might not come with an instruction manual, and that this can be, at the same time, our greatest freedom and our deepest anguish. Life, for most living beings, just happens. An animal wakes up, hunts, flees from danger, sleeps. It doesn't wonder if all this makes sense. But we, humans, are different. We have this rare capacity, and sometimes cruel, to ask ourselves, why? Have you ever watched a bird building its nest? It doesn't question its existence. It simply acts, builds, cares, survives. But us, we think, we question, we torment ourselves. And because of this, we often suffer more than we should. When we were children, everything started with simple questions. Why is the sky blue? Why do people sleep? Why does someone die? And as we grow up, the questions also grow. Why am I here? What does all this mean? Is it really worth continuing? It's ironic, isn't it? This same intelligence that we value so much, that allows us to create, imagine, love, is also the source of our suffering, because it gives us awareness of time, death, failure, loneliness. And along with it comes the urgency to find a meaning that justifies all of this. We are the only animals that know they're going to die. And that changes everything. When we look around for answers, we usually find more questions. And it's at this point that what philosophers call an existential crisis begins. This breaking point where life stops being automatic and becomes an enigma. There was a time when everything seemed more stable. Our grandmothers, great-grandmothers, had answers for almost everything. God has a plan. Every suffering has a purpose. Everything happens for a reason. Religion, family, customs, everything formed a network of meanings that accompanied us from birth to death. And even if not everything made sense, there was a structure. But the world changed. Maybe you grew up in a religious family and one day caught yourself doubting the stories that once seemed absolute. Not out of rebellion. Not from lack of faith, but because the mind grew and started asking questions that no longer fit the old answers. When Nietzsche wrote, "God is dead," he wasn't celebrating. It was a warning, a philosophical lament. The recognition that we had lost our inner compass. As if the map that guided our choices had suddenly erased. As if we were on the high seas, with no stars in the sky. And this loss didn't happen suddenly. It was slow, gradual, like an old house that starts to fade. First the walls crack, then come the leaks. And one day, without realizing it, we're living in a bare space, without the columns that supported our certainties. And then comes the inevitable question, now what? What do I do with this freedom I never asked for? Maybe you've felt this. Wake up, go to work, come back, watch something, sleep. Repeat the next day. And at some point, ask silently, what for? What's the point of all this? Why continue? This feeling has a name. Nihilism. It's like an emotional black hole that swallows everything around. Purpose, motivation, joy. And Nietzsche saw in this not a thinking error, but an existential risk. The danger of completely losing direction. Not because nihilism is wrong, but because it can paralyze us. Imagine a person who spent their life believing they worked to guarantee a better future for their children. They grew up with this idea as a North Star. But one day, they stop, think, and doubt appears. But for what exactly? So they grow up and do the same thing, work, strive, repeat the same cycle, To guarantee the future of whoever comes next? It's like we're on an infinite treadmill. We move all the time, but without going anywhere. Always busy, but increasingly distant from something that truly makes sense. Nihilism isn't just a philosophical concept. It's a physical sensation. An existential discomfort that comes out of nowhere, without warning. You look around, everything is fine, at least on paper. Stable job, relationships, organized routine. But inside, something doesn't fit. You feel like everything is made of cotton candy, sweet at first, but it dissolves before nourishing. Nietzsche warned about this, not out of fear of emptiness itself, but for what it can do to us. He feared that without finding a new north, we'd end up stagnated, unmotivated, or acting without responsibility. Because after all, if nothing seems to matter, what stops us from living on autopilot, or worse, from completely abandoning any effort? Nihilism is multifaceted. It's not a single idea. It's like a hydra with several heads, and each one bites in a different way. There's political nihilism, when we lose confidence in any power system. Epistemological nihilism, when we start doubting even our capacity to understand the world. And cosmic nihilism, when we look at the universe and feel that it's indifferent, cold, without answers. But today, we're going to focus on the two forms that most affect us day to day: moral and existential nihilism. Moral nihilism is subtle, but corrosive. It's when we start questioning whether there really is a difference between being good and not being good. Have you ever caught yourself thinking why you should be honest if so many dishonest people seem to do well? Or if it's worth being kind in a world where kindness is confused with weakness? Existential nihilism is even deeper. It's when everything that should bring joy simply doesn't anymore. You have people who love you, activities that distract you, maybe even achievements. But still, there's an emptiness that doesn't pass. It's like you're living a well-rehearsed play, with the right lines, precise gestures, but having no idea what the plot is. And worse, not knowing if there's still someone in the audience. Thousands of people live like this for years, and don't even know there's a name for this feeling. They think they're broken, ungrateful, cold. They feel guilty for not feeling complete, even having reasons for it. But maybe the problem isn't in them. Maybe the problem is in this human condition of ours, wanting to find meaning in a world that doesn't strive to give us explanations. And recognizing this isn't a sign of weakness. On the contrary, it's a sign that you're alive. It's a sign that you're attentive. It's a sign that you refuse to live on autopilot. The big question is, what do we do after we wake up? When we finally admit that maybe there isn't a great universal script, that maybe there's no one watching us from above with a list of right and wrong, we reach a delicate point. It's like being on a dark road, without a sign, without GPS, and without knowing which direction to follow. The philosopher Kierkegaard, who felt this anguish in his own body, spoke about what he called the leap of faith. It's that moment when we need to decide. Either we accept that nothing has a guaranteed meaning and try to live with that, or we choose, even in the dark, to believe in something, not out of certainty, but by decision. It could be faith, love, goodness, freedom, anything that brings real meaning to you. Think about it. How many fundamental decisions in your life were made with absolute certainty? When you chose a partner, did you know with 100% certainty it would work out? When you decided to have children, did you have guarantees that everything would go well? When you bet on a career, did you know it was the right path? The answer is almost always no. We live jumping in the dark all the time. We pretend security so we don't collapse. But the truth is, we're always making choices based on intuitions, hopes, feelings. Except now the choice is even more serious. Deciding if life is worth the effort. Some people make that leap back to their spirituality. Others build their own philosophies. And some simply learn to walk, even without knowing the destination. And there's something deeply comforting in this, knowing that you're not alone. Every person you meet on the street, on the bus, at the market, in traffic, has already gone through, or will still go through, the same crossroads. Some disguise it, others get stuck. But the most conscious ones make a choice and move forward, even without the certainty that it's the correct path. We live in a strange time, a generation that learned to pray in the morning and watch documentaries about the Big Bang at night. We grew up hearing miracle stories in childhood and scientific theories in adolescence. And deep down, no one taught us to reconcile these two worldviews. It's like living in two universes at the same time. In one, we're part of a greater plan. In the other, we're cosmic dust in a silent universe. Which one is true? Can both coexist? Are we looking for an answer where we should learn to deal with mystery? Maybe you've already prayed silently and when finishing, felt that you were just talking to yourself. Or maybe you've looked at the starry sky and wondered, is there anyone up there listening to this? This doubt isn't disrespect. It's courage. It's the honesty of admitting that we don't know, that maybe we'll never know. Some people resolve this conflict by choosing one side and denying the other. Others try to live in just one field, either science or faith. But there's a third way, one of the most difficult and most mature: living with uncertainty, accepting that maybe we'll never have all the answers, and even so, continuing to search. Jung, one of the greatest explorers of the human soul, said that maybe God doesn't need to be an entity outside of us. Maybe it's an internal force, something archetypal, symbolic, a psychic presence as essential as hunger or sleep, something our unconscious calls for, not because it wants to believe in something greater, but because it needs an axis so as not to get lost. Maybe the most honest question isn't, does God exist? But rather, what does this idea do inside us? How does it transform us, calm us, organize us internally? Rejecting all ready-made answers can be liberating, but it also leaves the soul more exposed. It's like leaving the house on a cloudy day without an umbrella. You feel free, but at the same time, vulnerable. Free from the weight of old structures, but also without emotional shelter when the storm comes. Because abandoning beliefs doesn't just mean changing your mind. Often, it means losing the rituals that gave us comfort, losing the references that guided us in the most difficult moments. When everything crumbles, who do you call? When the pain tightens, what do you lean on if you no longer believe that everything has a purpose, or that there's a greater plan? I've known people who, upon leaving religion, felt immense freedom. But I've also seen others who were left without ground. It's like demolishing the house where you lived for years, and still not having built another. You're technically free, but also exposed, alone, without walls to shelter you. Nihilism at this point can infiltrate without asking permission. The feeling that, if nothing has objective meaning, then why make an effort? Why be an ethical, kind, dedicated person, if the world doesn't seem to reciprocate? Some people use this as an excuse to live on impulse, just reacting to the moment, as if the absence of external judgment justified any kind of behavior. But maybe that's where the turn lies. It's precisely in the absence of external rules that we discover who we really are. When we remove all promises of reward, all threats of punishment, what remains? Who do you choose to be when no one is watching, and when nothing is being recorded? Maybe it's at this moment that goodness becomes more authentic. Being kind without expectation, loving without guarantee, creating beauty even knowing it's temporary. Maybe this is more noble than any virtue conditioned to a future reward. One of the most uncomfortable questions that arises in this emptiness is, if there's no supreme authority to define what's right and wrong, then is everything relative? Is being generous worth the same as being selfish? Is compassion just a personal opinion? These doubts are like stones in the stomach. They don't pass with ready-made phrases, because they force us to revisit the origin of everything we believe. Imagine realizing that the rules you always followed didn't come from above, but from ordinary people. It's like discovering that the Wizard of Oz is just a man hidden behind the curtain. Suddenly, what was sacred becomes interpretation. What was absolute reveals itself as human construction. But stop and think. Do you really need an external authority to know that causing suffering is wrong? Do you need a written commandment to know that caring for each other improves everyone's life? Maybe the most solid morality is the one that comes from within. That internal voice that warns you, almost silently, when something is going to hurt someone. That uncomfortable feeling that appears before any rule. Watch a small child. Before learning any doctrine, they already feel moved when they see another child crying. They approach, offer a toy, try to console. It's as if empathy was already there. factory installed. Maybe that's our true moral foundation. And if that's the case, morality that doesn't depend on heaven or hell can be even stronger. Because it doesn't need surveillance. It just needs presence. When we choose to be kind because we feel it does us good, and does good to others, aren't we being more human? When we choose to act with compassion because it's who we decided to be, aren't we taking total responsibility for our existence? Not everyone who abandons ready-made answers ends up without hope. Some philosophers manage to transform emptiness into creative space. Nietzsche and Camus are two strong examples. Both looked at the absence of meaning and saw freedom. Nietzsche said, "If there's no entity to give us purpose, then we're free to create our own." It's like being in front of a blank canvas. At first, this scares. But then, it's like realizing you can paint whatever you want, your own existential work of art. Camus went another way, but equally courageous. He said that life is absurd, that we'll always desire answers that the universe might never give us. But instead of fleeing from this absurd, he suggested we accept it and live with intensity, precisely because we know nothing is guaranteed. It's like dancing at a party knowing the music will end. Does this make the dance less valuable or more precious? Think of Sisyphus, the character from Greek mythology condemned to push a stone to the top of the mountain, only to see it roll back and start over the next day. Camus said, "One must imagine Sisyphus happy, not because the task makes sense, but because he decided to find meaning in the action itself." Maybe our life is similar. We wake up, work, relate, sleep, and the next day, everything again. You can look at this as a condemnation, or as a daily chance to choose how to push your stone, with bitterness or with lightness, alone or together with someone, grumbling or singing. The stone is inevitable, but the way we deal with it, that, yes, is a profoundly human choice. Nietzsche had a fascinating idea. What if, instead of waiting for someone to hand us a purpose, we ourselves became the authors of our meaning? He called this Übermensch, not a superhero, but a human being who takes total responsibility for their own existence. The Übermensch is someone who faces emptiness with courage and says, "If there's no ready-made script, I'll write my own." Someone who doesn't need the world to tell them what's important because they decide what matters. Not out of arrogance, but because they understand something deep. The truest freedom is to create your own values. Think of the people you most admire. They're probably those who live based on principles they chose consciously. And don't just repeat what they inherited. They help because they want to help, not because someone told them to. They create, build, dedicate themselves. Because they found in this something that makes them feel alive. Being the creator of your own meaning isn't being selfish. It's not doing everything that comes to mind. On the contrary, it's accepting the weight of your own decisions. When you choose your values consciously, you also assume the consequences. It becomes harder to blame others or hide behind excuses. It's like stopping being a supporting character in the play of your life and taking the leading role. You stop following someone else's script and start writing your own. You can create a tragedy or a comedy, an adventure or a drama, but you're the one holding the pen. And maybe this is the most challenging and most beautiful on freedom that exists. Discovering that, even without knowing it, you were always the protagonist of your story. Nietzsche saw nihilism not as a final destination, but as a tunnel, a dark, uncomfortable tunnel, but necessary. We go through this tunnel to come out the other side, with new eyes, new values, new strength. He believed you can't create something authentic without first demolishing what no longer makes sense. You need to empty the house before renovating, but not everyone can handle this process. Have you noticed how, in moments of existential crisis, people try to calm you with ready-made phrases? Everything will be all right. God has a plan. Just think positive. But maybe what we most need in these moments isn't comfort, but courage. Courage to remain for a while in uncertainty. Courage to face chaos without rushing to resolve it. To allow yourself to feel the weight of big questions before seeking answers. It's like cleaning a very messy closet. In the middle of the process, it seems like the mess got worse. Clothes scattered, empty drawers, objects you didn't even remember existed. But only this way is it possible to see what you really have. What's worth keeping? What can be donated? What no longer makes sense? Nihilism can be this moment of creative disorganization. You take everything off the internal shelves of the mind, question every idea, and it seems like you're losing control. But maybe you're just starting to reorganize your life in a more honest way. More yours. Many people get scared in this phase and run back to old certainties. It's understandable. Emptiness scares. But those who have the courage to remain there for a while, to breathe deeply and continue without a map, often discover something new within themselves. They discover strength. They discover creativity. They discover that chaos can also be fertile. Camus, another giant of philosophy, had one of the most daring and beautiful ideas of the last century. He said that yes, life is absurd. We want answers, but the universe remains silent. And even so, it's worth living. But not just any way. It's worth living with intensity, with presence, with revolt. Not an aggressive revolt, but a creative revolt. It's like looking at the sky and saying, okay, you don't give me answers? Then I'm going to live with such authenticity that the answers won't matter to me. It's loving knowing that love is fragile. It's creating beauty, even knowing it will disappear one day. It's being kind without guarantee of return. Not because you expect some reward, but because that's what you choose to be. Imagine someone who decides to plant a garden, even knowing that one day they won't be here anymore to take care of it. From a rational point of view, this might seem useless, but there's something profoundly human in this. Creating, caring, loving, even knowing everything is temporary. Camus spoke of 3 philosophical traps we should avoid. The first is giving up on life, abandoning the game completely. The second is fleeing to blind faith, where nothing more can be questioned. And the third is surrendering to closed systems, where everything is already decided. The alternative he proposes is more difficult, but also more noble, living in permanent revolt. Not against people, not against society, but against the very absurd condition of existence. It's waking up every day knowing there are no guarantees, that maybe nothing you do will have a great cosmic meaning. And even so, choosing to live, choosing to act, choosing to do your best with what you have. Not despite uncertainty, but because of it. Because if everything were predetermined, our choices wouldn't have the precious weight they have. And what if being lost isn't a problem? What if, instead of trying to find yourself, we learn to walk in the unknown with curiosity? Camus invites us to see our existential disorientation not as failure, but as freedom. When you were a child and got lost at the mall, that seemed like the end of the world. Your heart raced, your eyes searched for familiar faces, and fear took over. But now, imagine walking through a forest where you don't know the way. This time, it's not panic. It's curiosity. It's adventure. The difference isn't in being lost. It's in how you choose to look at this condition. Being lost isn't a sign of failure. It's a sign of freedom. It means you're not stuck to a script. There's no single mandatory destination, no path you should follow. This can be more liberating than scary, if you allow it. You can create your own adventures. Choose your own criteria for success. Invent your way of loving, relating, existing. That's the beauty of not having a map. The chance to draw your own. Think of the most fascinating people you know. They're probably those who, at some point, deviated from the expected path, and instead of freezing with fear, explored unknown territory. People who allowed themselves to make mistakes, change their minds, try again. And precisely because of this, saw landscapes that no one else saw. The freedom of being lost is also the freedom to find yourself again. When you're not sure who you should be, you open space to discover who you really are. When you don't know what you should want, you can connect with what you genuinely desire. It's in this uncertainty that magic lives, the ability to surprise yourself. Maybe the most sincere question isn't, how do I find the meaning of life? But rather, how do I create a life full of meanings that I myself chose? And maybe the answer isn't in sacred books, nor in success formulas. Maybe it's in the experience itself, in the courage to live, with all the doubts, with all the mysteries, with all the absurd beauty of being alive. In a universe that owes us no explanations, we were gifted with something rare, the extraordinary capacity to ask questions, and even more, to choose our own answers. If these words touch something in you, if at some moment you felt seen, understood, or even comforted, maybe this journey is just beginning. Check out the exclusive ebook here on the channel, Alchemy and Archetypes, where there are practical exercises that will help you in this process. And if this content resonated with you, consider subscribing to the channel and continue with me to the next video.